Remember, you exist because I allow it. You're under my control now. You follow my rules and do as I say." Those were the words my SEAL Admiral said to me as he signed my transfer letter, smiling like he owned my future. I can still see that smirk, that cold satisfaction in his eyes as he pushed that paper across his desk. He thought he was God. He thought he was writing my obituary. But the next morning, his phone lit up. "Commander Jenna requests your presence immediately." He walked in to obey my orders. Before I tell you what happened next, please like this video, subscribe to this channel, and comment where you're watching from: the US, the Philippines, Nigeria, or anywhere in the world, because this isn't just a story. It's a warning about what happens when arrogance meets destiny. My name is Jenna Torres. I didn't inherit a command. I built it with burned hands and sleepless nights. When I started in this military, I wasn't even supposed to be here. I was just a technician, crawling under aircraft engines, my hands black with grease, invisible to every officer who walked past me like I was part of the machinery. Nobody saw potential in the girl fixing their jets. Nobody except him. The Admiral found me one day, soaked in hydraulic fluid, troubleshooting an engine that 3 senior mechanics had given up on. I had it purring in 20 minutes. He watched me work for an hour without saying a word. Then he spoke. "Torres, you're wasted down here." Those 4 words changed my life. He pulled me up, sponsored my officer training, became the father figure I never had. I trusted him with everything: my career, my dreams, my future. He used to say, "Discipline is loyalty, Torres. Never forget that." I carved those words into my heart. I thought he meant loyalty to the flag, to the mission, to something bigger than ourselves. I didn't realize he meant obedience to him, not to the flag. I was so naive, so grateful, so blind. For 3 years, I was his perfect protege. I executed every order without question. I stayed late when he needed reports. I covered for his mistakes when higher command came asking questions. I defended his decisions even when they made no sense. I thought that's what loyalty meant. I thought that's what good soldiers did. But loyalty has limits. And mine snapped on a Tuesday morning in a briefing room that smelled like stale coffee and broken dreams. We were planning Operation Seahawk, an extraction mission in hostile territory. 12 of our people needed extraction, and his plan was going to get them killed. The intel was 3 days old. The weather window was closing. The enemy had moved positions. Every tactical manual, every piece of training, every instinct I had screamed that this plan was suicide. I raised my hand. "Sir, the intel package shows." "Did I ask for your input, Torres?" "No, sir, but the enemy has repositioned. If we go in on the eastern approach." "Enough." His voice cut through the room like a blade. Every head turned. Every eye focused on my humiliation. "You exist because I allow it, Torres. You're under my control now. You follow my rules and do as I say. Is that clear?" The room went silent. 12 senior officers stared at their hands, their coffee cups, anywhere but at me. My face burned with shame. My hands trembled with rage. But I said nothing. What could I say? He was right, wasn't he? He had made me. He could unmake me. I said, "Is that clear, Torres?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Now sit down and learn something about command." I sat down. I learned something about command that day. I learned that real leaders don't need to remind people they're in charge. I learned that strength doesn't require humiliation. I learned that the man I had worshipped for 3 years was not a leader, he was a tyrant. But the worst was yet to come. After the briefing, he called me into his office. The transfer letter was already typed, already signed. He slid it across his mahogany desk with the same casual indifference he might show discarding trash. "You're going to Naval Station Norfolk, Torres. Logistics Division. Maybe pushing paperwork will teach you some humility. Logistics. From combat operations to counting supplies. From the front lines to the filing cabinet. It was career death, and we both knew it. Sir, if I could just explain. There's nothing to explain. You questioned my judgment in front of my staff. You embarrassed me. And now you're learning that actions have consequences. He leaned back in his chair, that same cold smile spreading across his face. You exist because I allow it, Torres. And right now, I'm choosing to let you exist in Norfolk. Be grateful. That night, I sat in my quarters staring at that transfer letter until the words blurred together. 3 years of perfect service. 3 years of loyalty. 3 years of sacrifice. And this is how it ended, with a signature and a smirk. But something had shifted inside me during that humiliation. Something had cracked open and let the light in. As I stared at that letter, I made a choice. I wasn't going to break. I wasn't going to quit. I was going to prove that his control was an illusion. I went to Norfolk. I pushed his paperwork. I smiled and said, yes, sir, and no, sir, and played the part of the humbled subordinate. But behind closed doors, I was fighting. Not with fists or words, but with merit. With excellence. With quiet, relentless determination. I took every assignment they gave me and executed it flawlessly. I volunteered for the jobs nobody wanted. I stayed late, came in early, and turned logistics into an art form. I studied every regulation, every protocol, every loophole in the promotion system. I documented every success, every commendation, every small victory. When you underestimate the quiet ones, you mistake discipline for submission. He thought he had buried me. He thought Norfolk was my grave. He was wrong. Norfolk became my laboratory. 6 months into my exile, the promotion board convened. They had a stack of files 2 feet high, officers with stellar records, political connections, and powerful sponsors. And then they had mine. A logistics officer nobody had heard of, with a record that didn't just meet standards, it shattered them. 96% efficiency rating in supply chain management. 0 discrepancies in financial audits. Innovation awards for inventory systems that saved the Navy millions. Glowing recommendations from every supervisor. A promotion record that read like a fairy tale. The board members looked at my file like they'd discovered buried treasure. Where had this officer been hiding? Why hadn't they heard of Jenna Torres? They didn't know about the Admiral's control. They didn't know about the humiliation. They didn't know about the transfer letter. All they saw was excellence. All they saw was leadership potential. All they saw was exactly what the Navy needed. The promotion came through on a Wednesday. Commanding Officer, Naval Air Station Coronado. Not just any posting, his posting. His base. His kingdom. The Admiral never saw it coming. Why would he? I was just Torres, the broken bird he'd clipped and sent away to die quietly in Norfolk. He assumed I'd been forgotten, filed away like all the other officers who dared to question his wisdom. He went about his business, ruling his little empire, never imagining that empires fall when their foundations crack. I received my orders on a Thursday. I called my new chief of staff and quietly arranged the transition. No fanfare. No announcements. No warning. And then I waited. Friday morning, the Admiral was holding court in the officers' mess, regaling junior staff with stories of his tactical brilliance. He loved these moments, young lieutenants hanging on his every word, nodding eagerly at his wisdom. He was in the middle of a story about teaching respect to subordinates when his aide approached with obvious reluctance. "Sir, you have a call. Priority 1. The Admiral frowned but took the phone. "This is Admiral Richardson." "Admiral, this is Chief Petty Officer Martinez, Command Administration. Commander Torres requires your presence in the CO's office immediately." "Commander Torres?" "I don't know any Commander Torres." "Sir, the commanding officer. She's expecting you now." The Admiral's face went white. Not pale. White. The blood just drained away like someone had pulled a plug. His hands started to shake. His voice cracked when he spoke. "There must be some mistake. I am the commanding officer. Sir, as of 0800 this morning, Commander Jenna Torres is the commanding officer of Naval Air Station Coronado. She's requesting your immediate presence. The phone slipped from his fingers. It clattered on the floor of the mess hall while 20 junior officers watched their invincible Admiral crumble. He tried to speak, but no words came. He tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. For 30 seconds, he just sat there, staring at nothing, while the reality of his situation sank in. Then he stood, slowly, like an old man carrying the weight of his own mistakes. He straightened his uniform with trembling hands and walked toward the building that had been his palace for 3 years. The building where he had ruled with absolute authority. The building where he had humiliated me and signed my exile. The building that was now mine. He walked through corridors he had commanded, past portraits of leaders he had aspired to become, toward an office that had been his throne. Every step was torture. Every breath was agony. He knew what waited for him. He knew what he deserved. When he reached the outer office, my aide, his former aide, stood and saluted crisply. The commander will see you now, sir. Sir. Not Admiral. Not his title. Just the courtesy due to any senior officer reporting to his commanding officer. The final insult wrapped in perfect military protocol. He opened the door to the office that had been his for 3 years. The office where he had signed my transfer letter. The office where he had told me I existed because he allowed it. I was standing behind the desk, in perfect uniform, hands clasped behind my back, looking out the window at the base he had ruled. I didn't turn around immediately. I let him stand there, let him absorb the reality of where he was and who he was answering to. When I finally turned around, I saw everything I needed to see in his eyes. The shock. The disbelief. The dawning horror of his situation. He understood now what powerlessness felt like. He understood now what it meant to be controlled. Admiral Richardson, I said quietly. Please have a seat. He remained standing frozen, staring at me like I was a ghost. I said, have a seat. That wasn't a request. That was an order. From his commanding officer. And we both knew what happened to officers who didn't follow orders. He sat. I walked around the desk slowly, deliberately, and sat across from him. The same desk where he had humiliated me. The same chair where he had signed my exile. But now the roles were reversed. Now I held the power. Now I controlled his future. The silence stretched between us like a battlefield. I could see him calculating, trying to find an angle, searching for a way to salvage his dignity. But there was no angle. There was no salvation. There was only the consequence of his choices coming home to roost. Do you remember what you told me in this office, Admiral? His voice came out as a whisper. Commander, Do you remember? Yes. Tell me. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. I told you that you existed because I allowed it. That you were under my control. And how did that work out for you? The question hung in the air like smoke. He had no answer because there was no answer. His control had been an illusion. His power had been temporary. His arrogance had been his downfall. But here's what he didn't expect. Here's what shattered his understanding of power and revenge and justice. I didn't humiliate him. I didn't throw his words back in his face. I didn't make him grovel or beg or suffer the way he had made me suffer. I showed him what real leadership looked like. Admiral, you're an experienced officer with 30 years of service. You know this base, you know these people, and you have insights that would be valuable during this transition. I'd like you to serve as my senior military advisor for the next 6 months, if you're willing. He stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. He'd walked in expecting revenge, and I was offering him respect. He'd expected humiliation, and I was offering him dignity. He'd expected punishment, and I was offering him purpose. I don't understand. You once told me that leadership is control. I learned something different. Leadership is service. It's putting the mission above your ego. It's treating people with dignity even when they haven't earned it. It's being strong enough to show mercy when revenge would be easier. His hands were shaking now. Not with fear, but with something else. Something that looked like shame. Something that looked like understanding. You could destroy me. Yes, I could. But destruction isn't leadership. Building is leadership. Teaching is leadership. Showing a better way is leadership. I leaned forward, my voice gentle but firm. You taught me many things, Admiral. You taught me about tactics and strategy and military bearing. But the most important thing you taught me was what kind of leader I never wanted to become. The tears came then. Silent tears that traced down his weathered cheeks like rivers of regret. 30 years of command, and it took his former subordinate to show him what command really meant. For the next 6 months, he served as my advisor. He watched me lead with empathy instead of fear. He watched me build trust instead of demanding obedience. He watched me treat every sailor, from the newest recruit to the most senior chief, with dignity and respect. He watched me transform his base from a kingdom ruled by fear into a community united by purpose. Morale soared. Performance metrics broke records. Young officers stopped looking over their shoulders and started looking toward the horizon. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, he began to understand what he had done wrong for 30 years. The change in him was remarkable. The arrogance melted away like ice in the sun. The need to control others was replaced by a desire to serve them. The man who had once ruled through intimidation became a mentor who guided through wisdom. 3 months into our partnership, he came to my office with a request. Commander, I'd like to start a leadership development program for junior officers. Something that teaches them about service instead of power. About building people up instead of tearing them down. I approved the program. It became one of the most successful initiatives on the base. Young officers flourished under his guidance, learning from his mistakes instead of repeating them. But the most powerful moment came near the end of his assignment. We were reviewing quarterly reports when he stopped reading and looked up at me. I owe you an apology. Admiral. No, please. Let me say this. He set down the papers and looked directly into my eyes. What I did to you was wrong. Not just tactically wrong or strategically wrong. Morally wrong. I was supposed to be your leader, your mentor, your advocate. Instead, I became your oppressor. I started to speak, but he held up his hand. I told you that you existed because I allowed it. But the truth is, I existed at your mercy. You could have destroyed me, humiliated me, ended my career with a word. Instead, you showed me grace. You taught me about real leadership. You gave me a chance to become the officer I should have been all along. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out an envelope. I've submitted my retirement papers. It's time for me to go. But before I leave, I want you to know that these 6 months working for you have been the most meaningful of my career. You didn't just command me. You transformed me. The envelope contained his final report, but tucked inside was a handwritten note. Commander Torres, you taught me more about command in 6 months than I learned in 30 years. Real leadership isn't about control. It's about service. It's about lifting others up, not keeping them down. Thank you for showing me what I could have been. What I should have been. What I will strive to be in whatever time I have left. You exist not because anyone allows it, but because the world needs officers like you. Admiral Richardson. That was 2 years ago. The Admiral retired quietly and now works with veteran organizations, teaching leadership courses based on the principles he learned during our time together. He speaks at military academies about the dangers of toxic leadership and the power of redemption. And me? I'm still here, still leading, still learning. The base has become a model for the entire Navy. Our retention rates are the highest in the fleet. Our mission success rate is unmatched. Our people are empowered, motivated, and proud to serve. But the real victory isn't in the metrics or the awards or the recognition. The real victory is in the lesson learned and the cycle broken. The real victory is in showing that strength doesn't require cruelty, that leadership doesn't require domination, that power is best used in service of others. Every morning when I walk into this office, I remember his words. You exist because I allow it. But I've learned the truth. I exist because I choose to. Because I have value that no one can grant or take away. Because I have purpose that transcends any single person's approval or disapproval. He tried to control me, but real control is self-control. He tried to diminish me, but real power comes from lifting others up. He tried to break me, but real strength is forged in the fire of adversity. The loudest revenge isn't screaming or violence or cruelty. The loudest revenge is living well, leading well, being the person they said you could never be, succeeding in spite of their efforts to make you fail. He said I existed because he allowed it. But the truth is I existed because I endured. Because I chose grace over revenge. Because I chose to build instead of destroy. Because I chose to lead instead of dominate. And in the end, that choice didn't just change my life. It changed his. It changed everyone who watched it happen. It changed the definition of what strength looks like, what leadership means, what power is really for. Real leaders don't need to remind people they're in charge. Real power doesn't require humiliation. Real strength lifts others up instead of keeping them down. He taught me about control. I taught him about command. He thought he was writing my story. Instead, I rewrote his. And that, friends, is how the quiet ones change the world. Not with fists or fury, but with patience and purpose and the unshakable knowledge that dignity is not something that can be given or taken away by anyone else. It's something you choose, something you earn, something you protect, something you use in service of others. If this story moved you, if it gave you chills, if it reminded you that real power comes from lifting others up instead of keeping them down, hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and comment your country below. Because real respect isn't commanded, it's earned through character. And character, once forged in the fire of adversity, becomes unbreakable. Remember, you don't exist because anyone allows it. You exist because you choose to. And how you choose to exist, with grace or revenge, with strength or weakness, with leadership or domination, that choice will echo through every life you touch. Choose wisely. Choose powerfully. Choose to be the leader the world needs, not the tyrant it fears.